Hi everybody, Jake from Boatman UK here. It is once again that time of year where we all sort of pack away, or most of us, those of us that aren't brave enough, lock everything away in the garage or in the shed and come back next year when the weather gets a bit warmer. Of course, with the water temps now plummeting, it's getting harder and harder, and a lot of us won't even bother. So that comes on to today's topic, which is winter storage and what to not do and to do with your bait boat. So, of course, when you put everything away, like your normal gear and stuff, there's certain precautions and measures that you take. And the same applies for your bait boat as well. So today I'm just going to be going through a couple of little things that I recommend that you do before you put the boat away. And then that way, when you come back to it next year, it's going to be as you'd expect it to be. So this Vulcan here, I used it last weekend, and realistically, I'm not going to use it again for another good few months. So I'm going to go through a few things that I advise that you follow. You can use the same principle whether it's an Actor Plus, or a Vulcan. But first things first that we're going to cover is going to be batteries. So battery life, especially during winter storage, is very important because what you do with your batteries now will massively impact how long they're going to last in the future in terms of its actual lifespan, but more importantly, how long the battery lasts within the boat. So the most important thing to note with these kind of batteries that the boats use is that they need to be used in order to last. So every couple of months they have to have some degree of use, some degree of drain in order to last as long as they do. So what I'm going to do, first things first, make sure the batteries when you store them are fully charged. So we're going to take the batteries out of the boat, we're going to put them on charge, and we're going to wait until they go green. Don't leave them on. Don't leave them on in your garage all weekend or for a prolonged period of time. You will just knacker them up. All we want to do is just make sure that we know that we're putting the boat away in storage with the batteries fully charged. So let's get these batteries out and stick them on charge. Once your batteries are fully charged, what I'd recommend to do is if you have a bag, store them in the bag. Don't put them back in the boat, especially with the Vulcans, because of course there is no control in terms of you can't just disconnect the battery. With the Vulcans, the batteries are connected all the time, whereas with the Actor and Actor Plus, you can disconnect them. So with the Actor and Actor Plus, you can put the battery in the boat, just leave the main power lead disconnected. And with the Vulcans, I'd recommend just to leave the batteries either in the top tray of the actual doors themselves if you don't have a bag, or store them in the bag. The other thing you're going to want to do regarding batteries is make sure the remote's fully charged. The remote batteries aren't quite as critical as the boat batteries, but it just makes sense for the next time you come to the boat that the remote and the main batteries are fully charged. Another piece of advice on all the boats, the Actor Plus, and the Vulcan, especially if you're storing them in a bag, I'd recommend that the bag is left unzipped at the top so it can vent, and I'd also leave the lids off as well for the batteries. So obviously on the Actor and Actor Plus, you have an actual lid, like on these, that pops off and removes. On the Vulcans, you've got these little side pockets. I'd always leave them off just again in case if there's any risk of moisture, if you're storing it somewhere where it can get quite cold or anything like that, you can get a lot of variable heat change, and that can create moisture inside the boat. At least if you've got the lids off, you've got a good opportunity for it to vent into atmosphere. And again, the same with the bags. The bags can store a lot of moisture, especially when you've been using it throughout the year. It's going to be a little bit soggy in there. If you're leaving it zipped up, it's just going to be a trap for moisture and condensation. So the three things are: make sure that your batteries are stored fully charged, make sure that you're leaving the lid off the boat, and make sure that if you're storing it somewhere with it being potentially cold or even in a heated room, just make sure that the zip of the bag, if it's in a bag, is unzipped so that it can vent. So before we move away from batteries, just one more quick thing to add. Once you've fully charged your batteries, you're realistically going to be storing the boat for a good few months, unless you know that you've got another trip booked, in which case don't worry too much. But if you're not using the boat for about 3 months, one thing I recommend to do is to drain the batteries down a little bit. With a polylithium battery, one of the most important things, regardless of whether it's a bait boat battery or other types of batteries that are used, they have to be put through cycles. If you don't put it through cycles, you run the risk of just the battery life not being as long as what it should. So instead of it lasting, say, 5 hours, for example, you won't find that it'll last 5, it'll last 4, or something along those lines, for example. So cycles and being put through labour is one of the most important things, which is where this product comes into handy. So obviously a lot of us aren't going to be using the boat. So how are we going to drain the batteries down? Well, this is one of our USB conversion leads. So it's a battery to USB conversion lead to be exact. And we've got those listed on the website, and I'll go into further details of those in the description below. But essentially what this does is it allows you to plug this end into the battery, and you'll see a little red LED light that powers up on there. And this is a USB port. So what we often do with our boats are in storage is we'll use one of these, and to drain the battery down, we'll just put our phone on charge, for example, or any accessory, anything you can think of. You can use the battery itself as a power pack essentially, and that will allow the battery to feed some power into something and just keep it active. You don't need to fully drain it. You don't need to go absolutely crazy, but just charging your phone once every couple of months, or just a trickle up every now and then of course after that charge it back up again. It keeps the battery active, it keeps it happy, and it just means that more than anything, when you come back to it next year, you're going to get that full life out of it as you did the year before. One final thing that I will note as well is cleaning of the bait boat. We always want to make sure that the boat is still clean, especially if you're using certain types of bait. You don't want any mold or anything nasty developing on it, any nasty smells or anything like that. And of course, by leaving the bag open, we're not letting anything sort of really manifest itself to get too nasty. But regardless, we want to make sure the boat's clean. But the most critical part of this is regarding the use of oils. So the problem with a lot of oils and additives is all of us use it. Whether you add it to the bait when you're mixing it, if you mix it in with your pellet, for example, or you just add it when you're sending the boat out, it gets everywhere. The problem with a lot of oils and additives is they contain acetone, and the issue with that is it can cause the plastic to dry rot over time. Essentially, it's like putting water on a bare sheet of steel. It will just eat into it, and left over a long period of time, it can actually cause damage to the plastic, including cracking and fracturing. So we'll notice a lot of the time we'll get issues or reports of water ingress on a boat after it's been in winter storage. So around March, April time, when people start going back out again, we might get a handful of reports where water's being taken on board, and 9 times out of 10 what it often turns out to be is a boat's been stored with oils all over it, and over the 6 months it's slowly eaten its way and actually dry rotted the plastic, making it go very brittle, meaning that when you put it in that cold water, it just pings around the screw heads, for example, where there's tension, and it can cause it to crack. Simple resolution to that, and I'm not telling you to not use oils because that's not what we expect at all. The simple resolution, and I recommend to do this regardless anyway, is using not necessarily elbow grease, but a degreaser of some form. The problem is with oils, it repels water, so you can't just wash it off. That won't do anything at all. But you could use like a kitchen cleaner, so like fairy washing up liquid or something like this. So if you are using oils, and so don't just worry about cleaning just the top half of the boat. What I'm saying is you need to worry about the bottom half as well. So on this Vulcan, for example, I'd be opening up the doors, getting into all the nooks and crannies, just giving this a good old spray like this essentially, and then giving it a rinse off after as well. So really you want to be careful. You don't want to be using a hose or anything like that. You can use a spray water bottle, or if you're still at the bank, what you could do is you could spray it on, send it back out, swill it off in the water that way. But you want to make sure you swill it off after. Something like a degreaser is going to eat away at the oil that's sat on the surface, meaning that whilst it's sat in storage, it's not going to be slowly penetrating its way and doing damage to that plastic. Especially on the likes of the Actor Plus, for example, where the doors open, there's quite a tight gap around the doors, and it can often sit and collect. And that's where it can really do the damage, is where it's just sat there and it just eats away and erodes over time. And that just about covers it. There's not a whole load that you need to do, but it's just a good handful of precautions just to make sure that when you come to the boat next year, it's going to be exactly as you left it. There's nothing more frustrating than going for your first fishing trip of the year, all excited because you're back out on the bank, and all of a sudden your batteries aren't either charged or lasting as long as they should, or God forbid you end up with water in the boat because of a cracked hull, for example. And these are extreme scenario cases, but it can happen, unfortunately, to the best of us. We've experienced that ourselves, we've learnt from our lessons, and we reflect that and tell that to you guys to help you prevent yourselves from doing that. So hopefully this video helps. I do highly recommend to go through each thing if you are storing the boat away. However, if you're one of those brave guys that continues throughout the winter, fair play to you. I'm going to give you props for that. Anyway, fingers crossed this helps, and any comments or anything like that, or any questions, feel free to ask below. I'll be happy to help. Take care.